They say, some roads aren't built for driving, they're built for swallowing. Dead Mile Road was one of them, a strip of blacktop that seemed to appear only when you went looking for trouble, stretching through the trees for exactly 60 seconds of driving, though most who entered never swore how long it really was. Engines died there. Headlights flickered. And sometimes, if you were stupid enough to roll down your window, you'd hear voices calling your name from the dark. It wasn't marked on signs, and you'd never see it on a tourist map. Not Google, not Garmin, not the laminated highway charts sold at the Shell station on Main, but everyone in Mill Creek knew it. Ask the waitress pouring your coffee, the mechanic changing your oil, or the sheriff himself, and you'd get the same answer. Don't drive it, don't walk it, and don't even look at it after dark. People laughed when they said it, of course, nervous laughter. The kind that comes when you don't want to admit you're afraid. Evan Marshall had been hearing that laughter all his life. He was 17 now, tall and bony, with the kind of stubborn jaw that made him look angrier than he usually was. Most days he worked afternoons at the Shell, washing windshields for tips, then helped his mother close up at Dottie's Diner. Nights like this one, sat in the back booth, nursing a soda, and half listening to the old-timers complain about gas prices. It was Derek Halloran who brought it up. Derek always brought it up. Big shoulders, louder mouth, the kind of kid who thought being captain of the football team meant he ran Mill Creek. He leaned back in the booth, grinning like he owned the place. You ever notice, Derek said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear, how everybody in this town acts like Dead Mile's haunted? It's a damn road. Asphalt and trees. My uncle drove it last year and nothing happened to him. Not a thing. The air seemed to thicken around his words. Don't talk like that in here, Marcy, the waitress muttered from behind the counter. She didn't look at him when she said it. Derek just kept grinning. What? You scared, Marcy? Think the ghost of Dead Mile's gonna crawl. Crawl out of the fry oil and get me. He made a moaning sound, arms waving. His friends laughed. Evan didn't. Neither did Hannah Briggs, sitting quiet in the booth across from Derek. Hannah had long black hair and nervous hands that twisted her bracelets whenever she was uneasy. She wasn't laughing now. She was watching Evan instead, her eyes wide and cautious, like she was waiting for him to say something. And that's when Derek turned his attention. What about you, Marshall? You're always so damn quiet. You believe the stories? Evan could have shrugged, could have walked away. No. But something about Derek's smirk made his jaw tighten. I think people disappear out there for a reason, he said. Maybe it's not ghosts. Maybe it's not monsters. But something's wrong with that road. Derek's grin widened. Hungry, tell you what then. If you're so sure, why don't you prove it? Drive Dead Mile at midnight. I'll ride shotgun. Make sure you don't chicken out. The diner fell into silence. Even the old men stopped rattling their cups. That's not funny, Marcy said sharply. Don't be dragging him into your stupidity, Derek. But Derek leaned forward, eyes glinting. What's the matter? Scared too. Or maybe you think the road's gonna swallow him up like it did his old man. The words hit like a slap. Everyone knew about Evan's father. One night shift at the mill, he'd driven home and never arrived. His truck was gone. No body, no answers. Just whispers, he took the mile. Evan felt Hannah's eyes on him again, begging him not to. He should have said no. He knew better than anyone what the road could take. But 17 is an age where pride speaks louder than common sense. I'm in, he heard himself say. The diner exhaled all at once, muttered curses, shaking heads. Marcy slammed the coffee pot down harder than necessary. Hannah kept staring at him, her bracelets clicking against each other in a nervous rhythm. Later, lying awake in his room above the garage, Evan listened to the wind moving through the pines. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. And beneath that, softer, stranger, he thought he heard it. A whisper carried on the night air, like a secret meant for him alone.
Drive me.
Mill Creek wasn't much of a town, though. If you asked anyone born and raised here, they'd swear it used to be something. Once upon a time, there had been a lumber mill that kept the lights on. A paper factory that stank up the river but put food on every table, and a main street bright enough on Friday nights to feel alive. That was 30 years ago. Now, the mill was shuttered, the paper factory torn down, and Main Street looked like a mouth missing half its teeth. The movie theater had closed after one too many rats in the popcorn machine the hardware store had gone under. When the owner died and the high school football field had weeds taller than the cheerleaders growing through the bleachers, and what Mill Creek did have in spades was graves. The town cemetery stretched nearly 2 acres, rows of tilted headstones and cracked marble angels staring down at you with hollow eyes. Some of the markers were so old the names had worn smooth. Others were fresh, too fresh, with wilting flowers still clinging to their stems. There were more dead in Mill Creek than living, and nobody could ignore it. Evan walked past the graveyard most mornings on his way to school. He always quickened his pace when he did, not because of ghosts he wasn't too sure if he believed in those, but because too many of those graves carried last names he recognized. Marshall Greeley, Halloway Briggs, and Mill Creek. Death wasn't just a shadow, it was part of the family. That morning, the one after he'd agreed to Derek's dare, the cemetery seemed louder than usual. The crows on the fence posts cawed and shuffled, restless. The wind carried the faint squeak of an iron gate swinging, though Evan didn't see it move. He shoved his hands in his pockets and kept walking. School wasn't much of a refuge. Mill Creek High was the kind of place where the lockers had more rust than paint, and the ceilings leaked when it rained. Kids survived it in cliques. Football players, cheerleaders, the potheads who sat out back by the dumpsters, and everybody else. Evan was firmly in the everybody else category, floating between groups, not belonging anywhere. The whispers started as soon as he stepped into the hall. Word traveled fast in a town this small. He heard his name, heard the phrase "dead mile," caught Hannah's nervous face peeking at him from her locker. Derek made sure of it. He strutted through the halls like a conquering hero, telling anyone who'd listen about Evan's midnight run scheduled for Friday. He made it sound like some grand adventure, a test of manhood. For Derek, it was just another way to make himself the center of attention. For Evan, it was starting to feel like a noose tightening around his neck. By lunch, the whole cafeteria buzzed with it. "You really gonna do it?" kids asked. "What if the stories are true?" someone whispered. "Bet he doesn't even make it halfway," another sneered. Evan kept his head down, eating a sandwich that tasted like cardboard. Hannah slid onto the bench across from him, setting her tray down with a quiet clatter. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice low. "He just wants to humiliate you. That's all it is." Evan shrugged, though his stomach churned. "If I back out now, that's worse." She twisted one of her bracelets, eyes flicking around the room. "There are things about that road you don't know, Evan." That caught his attention. "Like what?" But before she could answer, Derek's voice boomed across the cafeteria. "Hey, Marshall, better polish up that shitbox car of yours. Don't want it breaking down halfway down Dead Mile, do we?" The table erupted in laughter. Hannah dropped her gaze, her face flushed, and Evan's fists clenched tight beneath the table. That night, working at Dottie's, he couldn't shake her words. Things you don't know. When the dinner rush was over and the neon sign outside buzzed faintly in the fog, old Mr. Greeley came in. He was a regular stooped shoulders, nicotine-stained fingers, a face like cracked leather. He drank his coffee black and talked too much. But sometimes, if you listened carefully, you could pick out stories other folks didn't dare tell. Evan brought him his usual mug, and as he set it down, Greeley squinted at him. "You're the Marshall boy, ain't ya? Heard your talk on the road Friday." Evan froze. "Word gets around," Greeley chuckled, a dry wheezing sound. "Boy, in this town, word don't just get around, it grows legs and runs." "You know what happened back in '62? Evan shook his head. "School bus full of kids," Greeley said, lowering his voice. "Whole thing went missing. Headed home from a field trip, supposed to take the highway. But the driver cut down dead mile to save time. Never came out the other side. They sent search parties, dogs, cops, hell, even the National Guard. Road was empty. Not a bus, not a tire track, not even the driver's lunch pail. Gone. Whole busload. The road just swallowed him up." Evan's skin prickled. "That's just a story." Greeley leaned in, his breath hot and foul. "Then why do I hear laughing when I drive past? Little voices. Singing songs. Counting games. Think about that when you're out there, boy." He sipped his coffee, eyes glittering. Evan forced a laugh, but it came out thin. "You're just trying to scare me." But later, lying in bed, he couldn't shake the sound of children's voices in his head, counting faint and sync song. 1 for sorrow, 2 for pain, 3 for the mile that takes you again. Friday night came colder than it should have been for spring, the kind of damp chill that crept under your jacket and settled in your bones. A fog had rolled in early, thick and low, curling along the edges of the pavement like smoke from an invisible fire. Evan sat behind the wheel of his battered '96 Ford Taurus, hands clenched on the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. The car smelled faintly of oil and fast food wrappers. He'd spent the afternoon trying to scrub it out, but some things, like bad reputations, stuck no matter how hard you worked. Beside him, Derek Halloran lounged in the passenger seat, all cocky grin and restless energy. He had a six-pack of beer rattling at his feet, and the kind of smug expression that said he thought the whole night was his show. In the back seat were 2 more kids, Tyler Jameson, thin as a scarecrow and perpetually stoned, and Rachel Pierce, one of Hannah's friends, would come along mostly for the gossip rights. Hannah herself wasn't there. She'd cornered Evan after school, pleading with him not to go. Her words stuck with him even now. "You don't know what you're walking into." She'd looked almost afraid, not of Derek, but of the road itself. Too late now. They were already idling at the start of the blacktop. Dead Mile Road stretched ahead of them, swallowed in fog. The trees leaned in close on both sides, pine branches interlocking like bony fingers. The asphalt was cracked and uneven, as though the earth itself had tried to spit it back out. "Go on, Marshall," Derek said, cracking open a beer. "Don't chicken out now. Whole school's waiting to hear about this." Evan's stomach twisted. He shifted the car into drive, the engine rattling with protest, and rolled forward. The headlights cut twin beams through the fog, but they didn't seem to reach far, just pale cones fading into darkness. For the first 100 yards, nothing happened. Just trees, fog, and silence. Tyler laughed nervously in the back seat, taking a swig from Derek's beer. Told you, man, it's just a road. Old people's stories. Nothing, but he stopped. Something moved in the fog to their right. Shadow. Quick. Thin. Like a child darting between the trees. Rachel sucked in a sharp breath. Did you see that? Yvonne kept driving, jaw tight. It's just the fog. Shapes play tricks on your eyes, but his hands trembled on the wheel. A quarter mile in, the Taurus coughed. The engine sputtered once, twice, then caught again. The dashboard lights flickered. Derek smirked. What's the matter, Marshall? Car can't handle a little haunted asphalt? Evan didn't answer. He was listening. Really listening. And that's when he heard it. Faint, almost hidden beneath the hum of the engine. Children, laughing. Rachel whimpered. Turn around. Evan, please. We can't turn around, Derek snapped. Not yet. We're not even halfway. The laughter grew louder. Evan's skin prickled. It wasn't happy laughter, it was the high-pitched, too-fast giggling of kids in the middle of a cruel game. It came from the woods, from the fog, from everywhere at once. The Taurus shuddered again. This time the headlights dimmed, pulsed, then flared back to life. The radio, which had been off, crackled suddenly with static. Out of the static came a voice. Thin, childlike, counting. 1, 2, 3. Tyler cursed, dropping his beer. It foamed across the floor mat, the smell sharp in the air. Rachel started to cry, muffled and desperate. Drive faster, Derek said, his bravado cracking just slightly. Evan pressed the accelerator. The engine roared, but the speedometer barely crept above 20. It was as though the road itself was holding them back. The counting voice on the radio rose. 4, 5, 6. Something thumped against the side of the car, hard like a fist. Everyone jumped. Evan swore and tightened his grip, knuckles screaming white. Another thump followed, this time from the roof. Then the hood. The car rattled with unseen hands pounding, slapping, dragging across the metal. Rachel screamed. Tyler ducked low, muttering prayers, and then silence. The radio went dead, engine smoothed. For a heartbeat, it was as if nothing had happened. Then the headlights caught it, a figure standing in the middle of the road, a small, child-sized. A girl, maybe 8 years old, with hair hanging limp over her face. She stood barefoot on the cracked asphalt, her dress white and dirty, her arms hanging stiff at her sides. Evan slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a stop just feet from her. His chest heaved, his heart hammered. The girl raised her head. Her eyes glowed faintly in the fog pale, milky, wrong. She opened her mouth, and though her lips didn't move, they all heard it. 7. The voice was everywhere inside the car, in their heads buzzing through the air like static. Rachel shrieked. Tyler clawed at the door handle. Derek, for once, didn't have a word to say. Evan's hands shook on the wheel. He wanted to reverse, to turn around, to do anything but go forward. But the girl lifted one finger, pointing down the road. The message was clear. Drive. Evan's foot was still on the brake, his chest heaving, when the girl vanished. 1 second she stood in the headlights, white dress glowing faintly in the fog. The next she was gone, as though she'd never been there at all. Rachel sobbed into her hands. Tyler whispered, Jesus Christ, over and over, rocking like a junkie in withdrawal. Derek swallowed hard, trying to claw his way back to bravado. It was a trick. Just some kids screwing with us. You know how people in this town are? Nobody answered. Evan eased his foot off the brake and pressed the gas. The Taurus lurched forward, groaning like a dying animal. The fog thickened around them, swallowing the beams of the headlights. The trees loomed close, their branches clawing at the glass. They'd gone maybe another 100 yards when the engine sputtered, coughed, died. The silence that followed was worse than the noise had been. Evan twisted the key. Nothing, just a dull click. The dashboard lights flickered once, then went dark. The radio hissed with a thin line of static before going silent too. "Don't stop!" Rachel cried, voice shrill. "I'm not trying to stop," Evan snapped, turning the key again and again. Taurus gave him nothing. "Pop the hood," Derek muttered, though his voice lacked its usual swagger. Evan hesitated. Something about the thought of stepping out of the car made his stomach crawl. The air outside felt alive, thick and waiting. But the alternative was sitting here in the dark, so he popped the hood. Derek shoved the door open, his sneakers crunching on the gravel. Fog swirled around his legs like it had been waiting for him. "Come on," he said to Evan. "Help me check it." Evan climbed out reluctantly. The night air was colder now, sharp in his lungs. The pines whispered overhead, though there was no wind. He propped the hood up, shining his phone's flashlight on the engine. Nothing looked out of place. Wires intact, battery fine. But when Evan touched the engine block, it was stone cold, as though it hadn't been running at all. "That's not possible," he muttered. "What?" Derek asked. "It should be hot," Evan said. "But it's cold." Derek swore under his breath, backed away from the car, suddenly uneasy. Behind them, Rachel cracked her window just a hair. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Evan froze, listened. At first it was faint, buried in the fog, then clearer, the sound of children whispering. Not words exactly syllables, half-sung nonsense rhymes, but dozens of voices, hush, weaving together like a choir of broken music boxes. Tyler yanked the window shut, his face pale. "They're out there! God, they're out there!" The whispers grew louder, closer, circling the car. The fog pressed against the glass like curious hands. Shapes moved in its maw, darting, childlike. Shadows with too long arms and heads that turned too far. Rachel screamed when one of the shapes pressed its face to her window. A pale blur of features, hollow eyes, a grin that stretched impossibly wide before it melted back into the mist. "Get in," Evan barked, slamming the hood down. He and Derek dove back into the car, locking the doors. The Taurus was a coffin now. The whispers pressed in on all sides, punctuated by soft thumps against the roof, the trunk, the glass, like small fists knocking. "Start it," Rachel sobbed. Evan twisted the key. Nothing. The car was dead. The whispers rose to a chant, high in sing-song, childish and cruel. One for sorrow, two for pain. Tyler clapped his hands over his ears, rocking. "Make it stop, make it stop." Then, without warning, the back door flew open. Fog spilled inside like a living thing. Tyler's scream cut through the night as hands small, pale, dozens of them reached in and grabbed him. He thrashed, kicking, nails scraping the doorframe, but the hands dragged him into the mist with terrifying strength. "Tyler!" Rachel shrieked, clawing at the empty air where he'd been. Evan lunged for the door, but Derek slammed it shut before he could. "Are you crazy? You go out there, you're gone too." The chant outside shifted, rising in glee. "3 for the mile that calls your name. Evan's chest heaved. His heart felt like it was clawing its way out of his ribs. Tyler's scream faded into the fog, swallowed until there was nothing left. Just the whispers, circling the car like wolves. Rachel curled into herself, sobbing. Derek sat rigid, fists clenched, eyes wide with the first real crack of fear Evan had ever seen in him. And Evan stared into the fog, the echo of Tyler's screams still burning in his ears, and understood something. The road wasn't just haunted, it was hungry. Rachel's sobs were ragged, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She kept clawing at the door handle like she could yank it open and chase Tyler back into the mist, even though he was long gone. Derek grabbed her wrist hard. "Stop it! You'll kill yourself! Let me go!" she shrieked, twisting in his grip. "We can't just leave him out there." Evan sat frozen, knuckles white on the steering wheel, though the car wasn't moving, couldn't move. The fog pressed against the glass like wet cotton, thick enough that even the high beams cut no further than a few feet. From somewhere deep in it came the sound of running footsteps, light, uneven, too fast to be human. They circled the car in maddening loops, stopping now and then just long enough for a soft giggle to rise from the mist. Rachel buried her face against the seat. Derek's tough guy mask cracked. His lips trembled, his eyes glassy. "They're still out there," he whispered. "They're still playing with us." Then, clear as a bell, Tyler's voice called from the fog. "Evan, guys, please help me." Rachel bolted upright. "Tyler?" She lunged for the door again, this time slipping Derek's grip. She had it open halfway before Evan shouted, "No, don't." A shadow flickered past the open door. Small hands slammed against the glass from the outside, too many fingers, too long. Rachel screamed and flung the door shut, curling up in the seat as though she could make herself disappear. The whispers came back louder now. Not children's rhymes this time, but words, chanting, ugly syllables that made Evan's stomach twist, like the sound itself was sour. Hungry, hungry, hungry. The roof buckled slightly, something heavy landing on it. Then the sharp scrape of nails metal against metal, dragging long grooves across the paint. Derek lost it. He kicked at the dashboard, pounding his fists against the window. "Get us out of here. Start the car, damn it." Evan turned the key again out of desperation. The tourist coughed once, then fell silent. The smell of gasoline filled the cabin, faint but acrid. Rachel whimpered, "We're going to die here." "No," Evan said through clenched teeth. His whole body shook, but his voice was steady. "We're not dying here." The whispers seemed to laugh at that. And then sudden silence. The pounding stopped, chanting cut off mid-word. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. The fog thinned just enough for Evan to see something ahead of them, a figure. At first he hoped it was Tyler, but as it stepped closer, illuminated by the weak beams of the headlights, his stomach dropped. It was the girl, the one in the white dress. Her head lolled at an unnatural angle, hair draped across her face. When she raised it, her eyes gleamed like wet glass. Her mouth split into a grin too wide, too sharp. She lifted a hand beckoning. "Come play," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost sweet, but it rattled the inside of Evan's skull like broken glass. Rachel moaned, covering her ears. Derek muttered, "No, no, no," rocking in his seat like Tyler had before. Evan stared, trapped between terror and the gnawing pull in his chest. A wrongness in the air, like gravity itself, was tugging him toward her. His hand twitched toward the door handle, clenched his fist instead. "No," he whispered. "You don't get me." The girl tilted her head. Then she smiled wider. The Taurus engine roared to life on its own. The headlights flared, flooding the fog. The girl's face vanished in the glare, and when the light dimmed, she was gone. Evan slammed the gear into drive before the car could change its mind. The tires screamed against the cracked asphalt, fog whipping past in streaks of white. They didn't speak. None of them. Not until the trees thinned and the road ended abruptly at Route 17, where cars hummed past like nothing was wrong. Only when Evan pulled onto the shoulder and cut the engine did the silence break. Rachel sobbed quietly into her hands. Derek sat back, pale and shaking, muttering curses under his breath. And Evan, staring back at the wall of fog that clung to the tree line behind them, felt a single thought burn its way into his skull. They weren't finished with him, not by a long shot. For a while, no one spoke. Evan drove them back into Mill Creek, headlights cutting through the ordinary darkness, traffic lights blinking like sleepy eyes at empty intersections. The normalcy of it was almost offensive. How could the rest of the world keep moving? How could the sidewalk still hold lampposts and mailboxes and parked cars when Tyler was gone? When the road had taken him, Rachel sniffled in the passenger seat, face buried in her palms. Derek sat rigid in the back, staring out the window with a fixed, glassy look, as if he could will himself into some other life where none of this had happened. Nobody said goodbye when Evan pulled into Rachel's driveway. She just opened the door and stepped out, walking up the path to her front porch with slow, dragging steps. The light over her garage flickered once, as though it were thinking about going out before steadying. Derek's house was next. He didn't say thanks, didn't even look at Evan, just slammed the door behind him and stalked up his driveway like a sleepwalker. That left Evan alone. His own house was quiet. His parents were in bed. The kitchen smelled faintly of dish soap, the TV remote still left on the couch from earlier. He moved through it all like a ghost, climbed the stairs, and shut himself in his room. He didn't turn on the light. Lying there in the dark, he could still hear Tyler's voice. Not the real one, not the laughing smartass tone Tyler always had, but the one from the fog, the one that had begged for help. The one that wasn't really Tyler anymore. By Monday morning, Mill Creek had swallowed it whole. Tyler's seat and homeroom sat empty. Mrs. Jenkins called his name twice before frowning and scribbling an absent mark in her folder. Derek slouched in the back row, hood up, eyes bloodshot. Rachel sat in front of Evan, hair pulled back, sleeves tugged down over her hands. She didn't turn around once. No one mentioned the road. No one mentioned Saturday night at all. But Evan noticed things. When Derek opened his notebook, his hands shook. His pen scratched the paper in wild, angry strokes before he tore the page out, crumpled it, and shoved it into his backpack. When Rachel leaned forward to grab her book, Evan saw deep red marks across her wrist, like fingers. Too small to be Derek's, too tight to be her own. And when Evan glanced at the window by his desk, he swore he saw a face in the glass pail, childlike, smiling. But when he blinked, it was gone. After school, Rachel found him by the bike racks. Her eyes were rimmed red, and she spoke in a whisper so thin he almost didn't hear her. "They don't stop." Evan frowned. "What?" The voices. She hugged her arms around herself. "I hear them at night, in my room, like they followed me home." Evan's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her she was imagining it. He wanted to say he didn't hear them too, but that would be a lie. Last night, as he lay in bed, something had whispered under his window. A sing-song voice, soft and playful. "Evan, come out and play." He hadn't looked. He hadn't dared. "They won't leave us alone," Rachel whispered. "Not until they get all of us." She walked away before he could answer. That night, Evan dreamed of the road. He was back behind the wheel. Fog pressing against the windows. The air inside the car thick with the smell of gasoline and rot. Tyler sat in the passenger seat, grinning with bloodless lips. "You left me," Tyler said. His voice was wrong. "Stretched. Now you'll come with me." Dozens of small hands burst through the windshield, glass shattering inward, dragging Evan forward into the fog. He woke with a scream caught in his throat, his sheets tangled and damp with sweat. But the worst part wasn't the dream. The worst part was the faint sound of children's laughter drifting in through his open window. By Wednesday, Derek looked like hell. Showed up to school unshaven, hoodie stained, eyes ringed with dark circles. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't laugh, didn't shove freshmen in the hall, didn't crack jokes about Rachel's clothes or Evan's grades. He just sat there, silent, staring at the chalkboard like if he blinked, the thing staring back would get him. At lunch, Evan finally cornered him. "You okay?" he asked. Derek's laugh was hollow, humorless. "Do I look okay?" Evan opened his mouth, but Derek leaned closer, his voice a whisper edged with panic. "They don't shut up, man. All night, all damn night, they're in my room. See them in the closet, in the corners. They're in the mirror when I brush my teeth." Evan felt the hairs rise on his neck. "What do they say?" Derek swallowed. His hands shook as he balled them into fists. "They tell me I'm next." That evening, Evan tried calling Rachel, but she didn't answer. He thought about biking to her place, but the idea of being outside after dark was unbearable. Instead, he texted Derek. No reply. By 10, Evan gave up. He crawled into bed, pulled the blanket over his head, and prayed for dreamless sleep. It didn't come. The next morning, Derek wasn't in homeroom. Rumors ran wild by second period. Someone had heard shouting outside his house around 3 a.m. Another swore his mother had been crying on the front porch when they drove past. By lunchtime, the truth leaked out. Derek had smashed every mirror in his house. The police had come, found him sitting in the living room, surrounded by shards of glass, covered in cuts. He kept saying the same thing over and over. They were coming through. I saw them. I stopped them. Rachel finally showed up to class that afternoon. Her face was pale, her sleeves pulled down even tighter, as though she was hiding fresh marks. She wouldn't look at Evan. By the final bell, Evan's chest felt like it was caving in. Tyler gone, Rachel slipping, Derek losing his mind. He was the only one holding the pieces together, and they were cutting deep. That night, Evan biked to Derek's house. The Hadleys lived in a squat ranch-style place at the edge of Mill Creek. The yard was littered with broken bottles, an old couch molding under the eaves, and a chain-link fence that rattled in the wind. The living room window glowed faintly. Evan crept closer and peered in. Derek sat cross-legged on the carpet, facing the bare wall where a mirror once hung. His face was pale, lips moving rapidly in words Evan couldn't hear. Around him lay a circle of broken glass, jagged like teeth. Evan tapped the window. "Derek," he hissed. Derek's head snapped up. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and unfocused. For a moment, Evan thought he didn't recognize him, and Derek staggered to his feet and stumbled to the door, yanked it open, grabbed Evan's arm, and dragged him inside. "You hear them too, don't you?" Derek whispered fiercely. "You see them, the kids?" "The eyes." "Don't lie to me." Evan hesitated, then nodded. Derek's grip loosened, relief flooding his face. "Then you know I'm not crazy. They're not just voices, they're trying to come through. Every night they're closer. I stopped them last night. I cut their way out." He gestured at the shattered mirrors. His hands were covered in small bandages, fresh blood seeping through. Evan's stomach twisted. "Derek, they're in your head. That's what they want, to make you shy."
Ow.
Derek snarled. His whole body shook. "You didn't see them crawling through the glass? Smiling at me with Tyler's face? You didn't hear them laughing?" Evan flinched. "Yeah, just not in mirrors." "Derek, listen," he said, voice trembling but steady. "We have to find out what the road is, why it's doing this. There has to be a way to stop it." Derek stared at him, chest heaving. For a moment, sanity flickered in his eyes. Then something behind Evan caught his attention, and his expression collapsed into terror. "They're here," Derek whispered. Evan turned. The hallway mirror by the kitchen door was cracked, but still intact. In the faint glow of the living room lamp, Evan saw a movement in its shapes darting across the glass like fish beneath water. Small, pale faces pressed to the surface, grinning, eyes hollow. And among them, Tyler, his face pale, lips split in a jagged smile. His voice echoed softly from the glass. "Come play, Derek." The mirror, spider-webbed with fresh cracks. Something pushed from the other side, straining the glass outward. Derek screamed. Evan grabbed his arm, yanking him back just as the mirror burst. Shards exploded across the tile. The lights flickered, and for a heartbeat, Evan swore small white hands reached through the jagged hole. But when the light steadied, the mirror was just broken glass on the floor. Nothing more. Derek collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Evan dragged him back toward the living room, heart slamming against his ribs. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't dare, because now he knew. The road wasn't just hungry, it was spreading. Rachel hadn't spoken more than a handful of words all week. She sat in class with her sleeves pulled down, scribbling in the margins of her notebooks, head bent so low her hair curtained her face. At lunch, she picked at food she didn't eat. A Wednesday, she was so pale, Evan thought she might faint. He cornered her after last bell, just outside the lockers. "Rachel, wait." She didn't. She shoved her books into her bag and kept walking. Evan followed. "Talk to me. You look like you're—" "I'm fine," she snapped, spinning on him. Her eyes were red, her lips cracked and trembling. "Just leave me alone." But as she turned, her sleeve slipped back. Evan caught a glimpse of scratches, bright red and fresh, climbing up her arm in jagged patterns. They looked too deliberate, too deep to be accidental. "Rachel," she yanked her sleeve down. "I said leave me alone." Then she stormed away, disappearing into the crowded parking lot before Evan could say another word. That night, Rachel lay in bed, clutching her pillow to her chest. She kept her lamp on, but the shadows in her room felt thicker, heavier, as though something lurked inside them. She stared at the ceiling, trying not to blink. Sleep had become her enemy. Every time her eyes closed, she dreamed of Dead Mile Road. She dreamed of the trees bending over her, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching down to drag her away. She dreamed of footsteps behind her, too light to be adult, too heavy to be animals. And she dreamed of whispers, children's voices, sweet and cruel, calling her name again and again. Last night, she'd woken with the sheets twisted tight around her arms, red marks on her wrists like something had been holding her down. She told herself she had scratched herself in her sleep, that's all. But she didn't believe it. Not when she looked at her arm now and saw fresh scratches she hadn't made. By 2 a.m., she couldn't take it anymore. Rachel slipped out of bed, barefoot, and padded to the bathroom. She flicked on the light and stared at herself in the mirror. Her face looked hollow, her eyes sunken, her lips dry. Her skin was pale, but not the kind of pale that came from missing the sun. It was the pale of something slowly draining away. She tugged her sleeve back. The scratches on her arm were worse than she thought, for parallel lines, red and angry, running from elbow to wrist. They looked like fingernail marks. Her stomach twisted. As she stared, something shifted in the mirror. For a moment, she thought it was just her tired eyes playing tricks. But then she saw it behind her reflection, in the shadows of her room beyond the door. A small figure. A child. Its face was pale and expressionless, its eyes wide and black. Its mouth opened, stretching too far, until it split into a grin that showed rows of tiny needle-like teeth. Rachel screamed and spun around. The hallway was empty. When she turned back, the mirror showed only herself, but her arm burned. And when she looked down, there was a new set of scratches running alongside the old ones. The next day at school, Evan found her in the library. She sat alone in the back corner, her books unopened, her hands shaking. "Rachel, please," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "You're not okay. I know it." "I saw your arm." She flinched, pulling her sleeve tighter. "You don't understand. Then make me understand." Her lips trembled. For a moment, Evan thought she might break. Then she leaned in close, whispering so quietly he barely heard her. "They come at night." Evan's stomach dropped. "The voices." Rachel shook her head, eyes wide and wet. "The children, they're in my room. I hear them giggle. I feel them pull at me. They scratch me when I don't listen." Evan felt ice in his veins. "Rachel, that's not real." "Yes, it is," she hissed, slamming her hands on the table. Her voice cracked, desperate. "I see them. They're little and pale, and they smell like dirt and dead leaves. And sometimes..." She broke off, choking back a sob. Evan reached for her hand, but she jerked away. "They want me," she whispered. "They said Tyler told them I'd play." That night, Rachel locked her bedroom door and pushed a chair under the knob. Didn't matter. Sometime after 3, she woke to the sound of scratching. Not outside, not in the hall. Inside her room. Her lamp flickered, dimmed, then steadied. She sat up, clutching her blanket. The scratching came from the corner by her desk. "Who's there?" she whispered. A giggle answered her. High, soft, cruel. Her throat closed. She pulled the blanket to her chin, but it didn't help. She could feel the weight on the mattress shift, as if someone small had climbed onto the bed beside her. She didn't look. She couldn't. A tiny hand touched her arm. Cold fingers dug into her skin. She whimpered, squeezing her eyes shut. "Play with us," a voice whispered by her ear. She screamed. Her lamp shattered. Darkness swallowed the room. And when her mother burst in minutes later, flicking on the hall light, she found Rachel curled in a ball on the floor. Her arms covered in bloody scratches that hadn't been there the night before. The next morning, Evan's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel's number. "Don't come over. Don't call. It's too late for me." His chest tightened, his hands trembling as he stared at the screen. And then, as if the road itself wanted to mock him, another message arrived. "Play with us too, Evan." The library smelled like dust and mildew. It was Saturday morning, the place nearly empty except for an old woman dozing behind the front desk. Evan slipped past her and headed straight for the basement archives, where the real history of Mill Creek lay in boxes nobody bothered with anymore. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, only that he couldn't sit still while Rachel bled from invisible hands and Derek raved about voices in mirrors. Dead Mile Road. There had to be something. The basement was dim, lit by a single buzzing fluorescent bulb. Rows of metal filing cabinets lined the walls, and cardboard boxes sagged on the floor. Evan pulled open drawers at random property deeds, old tax rolls, graduation programs. Nothing. Then, in a cabinet labeled Town Incidents 1940 to 1980, he found it. A folder marked Highway 7 Bypass. His pulse quickened. He dragged it out, flipping through brittle pages. At first, it was mundane maps of proposed routes, budget numbers, council meeting notes. But tucked in the back was a yellowed newspaper clipping. August 12th, 1958. 3 local children missing. He scanned the names: Thomas Weaver, age 10. Emily Jenkins, age 9. Caleb Porter, age 11. All last seen riding their bikes toward the old road out by the creek. Dead Mile Road. His stomach tightened. Another clipping followed. Search suspended. Parents interviewed. Sheriff quoted, promising the investigation would continue, though no trace had been found. The file should have ended there, but it didn't. Buried beneath the clippings was a handwritten note scrawled in shaky pen. "Don't build over it. Don't disturb it. The ground belongs to them." There was no signature. Evan stared at the words until they blurred. His hands were damp with sweat. By the time he left the library, the sun was setting, painting the horizon in bruised colors. He biked home fast, the folder clutched in his backpack, every shadow along the sidewalk watching him. That night, he spread the papers across his desk. His lamp cast weak light over the names, the dates, the warnings. 3 kids missing in the 50s, and then another story buried deeper in the stack. June 1974, teenagers vanish on Old Creek Road. For names this time, bodies found. No suspects. Search parties disbanded within weeks. Dead Mile Road again. He flipped to the back. There was another note. It calls to them. Children first. Always children. Evan shoved the papers away, his stomach heaving. The phone rang, making him jump. He snatched it up, heart pounding. "Hello?" Static answered him. Then faintly laughter, high-pitched, thin. "Children, who is this?" demanded. The laughter grew louder. Then a voice whispered, close as if spoken right against the receiver. "We know you're looking, Evan." The line went dead. Evan dropped the phone. His hands shook so badly he had to sit down. So the next morning, he couldn't keep it to himself anymore. He met Derek behind the gas station, where they wouldn't be overheard. Derek looked worse than ever. Hair greasy, hoodie, unwashed, eyes bloodshot. Evan spread the clippings on the hood of Derek's car. "Look, it's happened before. In 58 and 74, kids gone. No answers. Derek's hands trembled as he touched the yellowed paper. They never came back. Evan shook his head. Derek swallowed hard, then laughed bitterly. So that's it, huh? We're screwed. Just a long line of kids the road chews up and spits out. No, Evan said firmly. It means there's a pattern. It means maybe we can figure out how to stop it. Derek glared at him. Stop it? You saw the mirror? You saw them? How the hell do you fight something that crawls out of glass and laughs at you in the dark? Evan didn't answer, because he didn't know. That night, Evan went back to the folder, desperate for more. And he found one last clipping, tucked so deep he almost missed it. May 1983, local pastor claims land cursed. He scanned the article. Reverend James Holloway had stood before the town council, insisting the road was built on unhallowed ground. He demanded the bypass project be abandoned. The council called him hysterical. Months later, Holloway disappeared. The final line chilled Evan most of all. His last sermon warned of roads that lead nowhere, and of children who play forever where no living soul should walk. Evan shoved the folder closed, his breath ragged. The road wasn't just a stretch of blacktop. It was older, hungrier, and it had been waiting. That night, as he tried to sleep, Evan heard a soft tap against his window. He froze. The tap came again, slow, deliberate. His curtains swayed, though the window was closed. And when he finally gathered the courage to peek, he saw small handprints smeared across the glass. From the inside, Evan hadn't planned on going back to the road, but when Rachel showed up at his door just after dusk, pale and shaking, he knew it was time. She didn't even say hello, just, "We have to end it." Her sleeves were shoved up now, as if hiding the scratches was pointless. Angry red welts ran the length of her arms, some old, some fresh. Evan felt sick just looking at them. Before he could answer, Derek pulled into the driveway, headlights cutting across the yard. He climbed out of his car looking worse than both of them, sunken cheeks, twitching hands, eyes darting at shadows no one else could see.
Oh.
None of them said much. They didn't have to. The road had already dragged them into its game. They met in Evan's basement, spreading papers and clippings across the old ping-pong table like they were detectives in some crime show. But there was nothing glamorous about it, just three kids desperate not to vanish. Evan pointed at the yellowed articles. It's been happening for decades. Kids disappear, the town forgets, and no one talks about it again, I guess. They're afraid. Or they've made peace with it somehow. Rachel rubbed her arms, wincing at the fresh scratches. So what does that mean for us? It means we can't ignore it, Evan said. If we don't figure out how to stop it, we're next. Derek gave a sharp laugh. Stop it. You think we're gonna pull a Ghostbusters and bust some demons? This thing doesn't play fair. Doesn't even play by rules. Everything has rules, Evan snapped, louder than he meant to. His voice echoed off the basement walls. We just don't know them yet. Rachel's voice was small. What if the rule is, it always wins? The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Evan spread out the last, clipping the one about Reverend Holloway. The pastor who disappeared after calling the road cursed. He mentioned unhallowed ground, something buried. It has to mean something. Yeah, Derek muttered. Means the church nut lost his marbles and walked into traffic. But Evan shook his head. No, look, he said. Roads that lead nowhere. Children who play forever where no living soul should walk. That's not rambling. That's a warning. Rachel leaned forward, her eyes hollow. Then maybe the only way to end it is to go back, to face it. Derek slammed his hand down. No way in hell I'm stepping foot on that asphalt again. But even as he said it, they all knew it was a lie. By midnight, the decision was made. Not because they were brave, but because the road was coming for them, whether they went willingly or not. They made a pact. They would return to Dead Mile Road together, stay until they found something, anything. And if one of them started to slip away, if the voices, or the hands, or the mirrors pulled too hard, the others wouldn't let go. It sounded noble when Evan said it aloud, but the looks on their faces told a different truth. None of them fully believed they'd come back. They met at the edge of town just after 1 a.m. The moon was thin and sickly, the stars drowned by a sky that seemed heavier than usual, as if the night itself wanted them gone. Evan rode his bike, Rachel walked, Derek drove his beat-up sedan. They left their phones behind after too many calls full of static and laughter. They didn't trust the devices anymore. When the cracked sign came into view, Old Creek Road, closed to traffic, Rachel stopped walking. Her hands shook. Breath came in shallow bursts. It doesn't want us here. No, Evan said, forcing his voice steady. It wants us. That's the problem. Derek spat on the dirt. Then let's give the bastards what they want. The road looked the same as always. Mile of cracked blacktop disappearing into the trees, slick with shadows that moved when nothing else did. But stepping onto it was different this time. The air changed thicker, colder, carrying the faint sound of children laughing somewhere just out of sight. The trees leaned inward, branches twisted like they were eavesdropping. Evan felt a pressure in his chest, like he'd walked into deep water. Rachel whimpered. They're here. Where? Derek demanded, spinning in a circle. His voice was shaking. Where the hell are they? Evan held out his hands. Stay together. Don't let go. So they did. 3 kids side by side walking the stretch of cursed asphalt with fingers clenched so tight their knuckles went white. The laughter grew louder. Then whispers and footsteps padding across the cracked pavement, though no one was visible. Rachel gasped. Something touched me. Derek cursed under his breath. Screw this, I'm done. He started to pull away, but Evan grabbed him, forcing him to stay in line. The air grew colder still. Her breath came out in pale clouds. And then, at the far end of the mile, a figure appeared. Small, still, waiting. Tyler. His skin was gray, his smile too wide, his eyes bottomless. Rachel screamed. Derek went pale. Evan held them tighter. Don't look at him. Just keep walking. But Tyler took a step forward, then another. His mouth opened, and a voice came out, not his voice, but dozens of children, overlapping, chanting, "Play with us. Play forever." The ground shuddered. The pavement cracked, and from those cracks, pale hands began to claw upward, dozens of them, reaching for ankles and wrists and throats. Rachel shrieked as cold fingers wrapped around her leg. Derek kicked, stomping the hands until they shattered like brittle bone. Evan pulled them both forward, his own legs trembling as hands reached for him too. "Run!" he screamed. "Don't stop!" They stumbled down the road, shadows chasing, laughter echoing, the ground itself splitting open to swallow them whole. And as they ran, Evan realized the truth. They weren't walking into Dead Mile Road. Dead Mile Road was walking into them. The pavement split open like rotten wood. Evan yanked Rachel forward, his lungs burning, but the ground beneath them trembled with every step. Hands clawed out of the cracks, pale and grasping, their nails black with soil. Some were small, like children's. Others were larger adults. It's maybe but just as wrong. Their fingers jointed at strange angles. The road wasn't just taking children. It was keeping everyone. Rachel stumbled, screaming as cold hands wrapped around her ankle. Evan dropped beside her, prying at the fingers, but they were impossibly strong. Derek kicked wildly, his sneaker slamming down until the hand snapped, scattering like broken porcelain. Rachel scrambled up, breathless. "They don't want us to leave." "No," Evan panted. "They want us with them." Ahead, Tyler stood waiting. His gray skin gleamed under the thin moonlight. His smile stretched too wide, lips tearing at the corners, black gums exposed beneath. He raised one hand and beckoned. The chorus of voices grew louder. "Play with us. Stay with us. Forever. Forever. Forever." Derek's eyes glazed. He stumbled a step forward, arms slack at his sides. "Tyler?" "No." Evan grabbed him, shaking hard. "That's not him, Derek. It's not your brother." But Derek's face crumpled, tears spilling down his cheeks. "He's right there. He's right." Tyler opened his mouth, and the sound that poured out wasn't human. A shrieking, grinding noise, like children screaming and metal tearing all at once. The trees along the road bent inward, branches snapping as if bowing to the sound. Rachel clamped her hands over her ears, sobbing. Evan felt the scream in his bones, rattling his teeth, shaking the fillings in his molars. Derek fell to his knees. Then the pavement split wider. A chasm yawned open across the road, black and bottomless. From the darkness below came more voices, hundreds, thousands, overlapping, whispering and laughing and weeping all at once. Shapes swarmed inside that darkness. Faces, children's, adults, twisted beyond recognition. Hands clawing at the edges. It wasn't just a road, it was a graveyard, a pit with no end. Rachel clutched Evan's arm, nails digging into his skin. "We have to go, we have to get out." Evan stared at the abyss, heart hammering, realization sinking into him like ice. There isn't an out. This is where it ends. The hands lunged faster now, clawing at their legs, their clothes. One caught Evan's wrist, pulling so hard he nearly toppled. He fought it, teeth clenched, until Rachel ripped a jagged stone from the cracked pavement and smashed it down. The hand shattered. "Run!" she screamed. "Don't look back!" They ran. The road seemed to stretch longer with every step. What should have been a mile became endless, trees blurring together, the cracks chasing them like hungry mouths. Tyler's figure followed, always ahead, always waiting, no matter how far they ran. And then Evan saw at the end, not the beginning where they came in, not the town, something else. A wall of mist rose across the road, thick and gray, swirling like smoke. Beyond it, nothing. Rachel stumbled to a stop. "What is that?" "The end," Evan whispered, "or maybe the beginning." They didn't get the choice to decide. The mist surged forward, swallowing the road. Cold fingers closed around Evan's throat, yanking him backward. Rachel shrieked as something dragged her by the hair. Derek's scream was ragged and broken, his body pulled toward the chasm. Evan thrashed, but the hands were everywhere now, dozens, hundreds crawling from cracks, reaching from shadows, pressing through the mist. And then he heard it clearer than anything else. Tyler's voice, not the chorus, not the road, just Tyler. "Help me." It froze, Evan in place. He turned, searching the chasm. And there, for the briefest moment, he saw his best friend, not the gray-skinned phantom, not the wide-mouthed creature, just Tyler, 10 years old. Freckles, messy hair, eyes wide with terror. "Don't leave me here." Evan's chest cracked open. Tyler, the vision vanished. The gray phantom stood in his place, grinning, mouth tearing wider until it split his face in half. The voices screamed. The ground gave way. And Evan, Rachel, and Derek were dragged down into the mist. Evan's last thought before the dark swallowed him whole was simple and horrifying. Dead Mile Road wasn't a place. It was a door. And they had just stepped through. The mist swallowed everything. Evan opened his eyes, but the world around him was milk-white, swirling in endless sheets. His chest ached as if he'd been underwater for too long. When he gasped, the air stung like breathing in dry ice. Rachel. His voice cracked, thin and muffled, as though the mist absorbed sound. Derek. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but silence. Then Rachel staggered out of the haze, clutching her head. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was alive. Derek stumbled behind her, pale and shaking, his sneakers soaked in some black sludge that clung like tar. "What? Where are we?" Rachel whispered. Evan turned in a slow circle. There was no road anymore, no pavement, no trees, just fog, stretching forever. And yet, the ground under his shoes was solid, gritty, like asphalt burned down to ash. The mist shifted, and in the shifting, shapes appeared. Street signs bent backward. Houses without roofs, their windows lit by dim orange fire. Swing sets that creaked without moving. And there across a crooked fence was Mill Creek's old gas station. But it wasn't right. The sign flickered, the letters backwards, as though written in a mirror. The pump stripped a black liquid that hissed when it touched the ground. Rachel grabbed Evan's arm, nails biting into his sleeve. "That's home," she whispered. "That's Mill Creek." Evan shook his head. "No, that's not home. That's something else." A sound cut through the fog, a child's laughter, thin and broken, echoing in every direction at once. Derek flinched. "Tyler," he breathed. The laughter sharpened into screams. Rachel pressed a hand over her mouth. "We shouldn't be here." Evan wanted to agree, but the truth sank into him heavy and cold. They didn't have a choice. The road hadn't dragged them into nothing. It had dragged them somewhere. Oh, as they moved, the town around them grew sharper, more defined. The houses leaned inward, roofs sagging like they'd been waterlogged for decades. Windows wept black streaks, and inside, shadows shifted even when no one was there. At the schoolhouse, the bell tolled by itself. The sound was warped, as if played backward, but each note thudded through Evan's skull like a heartbeat. They passed the diner. Its neon sign buzzed faintly. "Eat." Inside, pale figures sat in booths, hunched and motionless. Plates of untouched food sat in front of them, rotten eggs, pancakes gray with mold. One of the figures turned its head as they passed. Its face was smooth. No eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched over bone. Derek whimpered, "I want to go home." Rachel swallowed hard. Maybe this is home, just wrong. Evan shook his head. "No, it's the road. We're inside it now." They didn't see Tyler until they reached the church. The steeple leaned sideways, split open at the top. The cross hung upside down, dangling by rusted nails. And at the door stood Tyler, not the phantom version they'd seen before. This was Tyler as he had been the night he vanished. Muddy sneakers, a faded Batman hoodie, hair sticking up in the back. His freckles stood out stark against his pale skin. "Tyler," Drek cried, rushing forward. Rachel grabbed his arm, but it was too late. Derek flung himself at his brother, arms wide, and for a moment, just a moment, it worked. Tyler hugged him back. Evan saw the relief on Derek's face, tears spilling down as he buried his head against his brother's shoulder. Then Tyler whispered something. Evan couldn't hear it, but he saw Derek's face change. His eyes widened, his body stiffened. His mouth opened in a silent scream, and then he was gone. The mist folded around him, pulling him away, leaving Evan and Rachel staring at the space where he'd been. Rachel shrieked, stumbling backward. "No, no, no, no." Tyler turned to them. His eyes were empty sockets now, dark and dripping. His smile split wide, stretching from ear to ear. "Don't worry," he said, his voice both Tyler's and not Tyler's. "He's with us now. He'll be next." The church doors creaked open. Inside, the pews were filled not with parishioners, but with children. Dozens of them, gray-skinned and hollow-eyed, sitting silently. Some rocked back and forth. Others smiled with mouths too wide. And at the pulpit stood a figure in a black robe, its face hidden beneath a veil of shifting mist. Its voice crawled out like oil. "Welcome to the Hollow Mile." Rachel's knees buckled. Evan grabbed her, holding her upright, though his own legs threatened to give. The robed figure raised its hands. The children in the pews all turned in unison, their hollow eyes fixing on Evan and Rachel. "Your road brought you here," the figure said. "Every town has one. Every child walks it. Some return, some don't." Its voice deepened, vibrating the air. "But all roads lead here eventually." Rachel's breath came in ragged sobs. We don't belong here. We're not staying." The figure's smile was visible, even through the mist-crooked cruel. "You already are." The children began to rise from the pews. One by one, their footsteps echoed against the warped wooden floor. Evan clutched Rachel's hand and pulled her backward, but the church doors slammed shut with a thunderclap. The robed figure lifted its arms higher. The air thickened. The mist surged. And in the choking white, Evan realized the truth. Dead Mile Road wasn't the trap. This place was. They were already inside it. The wood under their feet buckled like the inside of an old ship. The pews creaked as the kids, no longer children in any ordinary sense, rose and turned their hollow faces toward Evan and Rachel. The robed figure's arms were still raised, a slow conductor in a place where music had died long ago. The air smelled of wet earth and old hymnals. Evan's mouth moved, words forming without permission. He tried to think of a plan, and his mind handed him nothing but scraps newspaper clippings. Earl's whiskey breath, Reverend Holloway's last note. He had a sense, a stupid, bright little idea that some old town song or a name might be a key. Memory felt like leverage. Evan, Rachel rasped. Her fingers were white around his wrist. "We need to move now." They lurched forward, but the aisle stretched like taffy. Every step made the wooden floor groan, and every groan answered with a dozen childish giggles, as if the chapel were delighted in their confusion. The children in the pews didn't hurry. They rose in unison, a slow, deliberate tide that would have been comical if it weren't so bone-deep creepy. The robed thing's voice washed over them again, softer this time, as if it took pleasure in close whispers. You walked the road. The road walked you. Names are currency, here have one to trade. Evan remembered the note tucked behind the clippings. Don't build over it, don't disturb it. The handwriting had been urgent. Holloway's sermon, roads that lead nowhere, reverberated in his skull. Names, currency. If names are currency, Evan thought, maybe names by passage. His throat tight with fear, he called Reverend Holloway. The word sounded ridiculous in that place, like calling out an address in a dream. For a second, nothing happened. Then a ripple moved through the pews, quiet like frost cracking. The robed figure cocked its head, curious. It said, in a voice that tasted like pennies, "Holloway speaks." A shape in the nearest pew tilted, the suggestion of a head with no real face. The child closest to them, one with hair like wet rope, folded its hands, and the hands were not empty. In them lay a tiny book, leather cracked and smelling of smoke. The child set it on the pew and opened it. The pages were blank. The ink had been drunk away. But as Evan watched, letters crawled from the margins and into the margins again, forming a single name. As the name shimmered in the air, James Holloway. Evan felt a tug in his bones. Not the road's pull, but a pressure like a tide shifting beneath him. Names did something here. They shifted things. "Kay," he said aloud, words tumbling. "We have to..." He stopped. He had no idea how to use a name, how to bargain with one. Rachel's eyes were wide and wet. They use people's memories, I think. She didn't finish. A child reached out and touched her jaw with a fingertip cold as river stones. "Play with us," it whispered. Evan shoved the hand away and staggered to the pulpit, felt suddenly important, like an altar in a religion whose rules he'd not yet learned. He scanned for anything to anchor them notes, a hymnal, a photograph. There was a photograph nailed crooked on the wall behind the pulpit, sepia and faded. A town picnic. In the center was Reverend Holloway Younger, arm around a man whose face had been smudged by time. The man's mouth was stitched over in the print, a dark line no photograph should bear. Evan slapped his palms against the wood. If names matter, if the road keeps names, maybe we can trade them, he said. Maybe we can give it something it wants that isn't us. What could we give? Rachel breathed. We don't have anything. Tyler's Derek's. Her voice broke. She wasn't talking about the lost bodies. She meant pieces of them. Memories, laughter, teenage jokes now turned into hollow things. Not things, Evan said, surprising himself. A sudden picture flicked in his mind. Earl Hadley. Cigarette as long as a history lesson. Telling him the road kept voices, used them as bait. Maybe you could unbait a hook. Maybe you could cut a line. Names, he whispered. We say names. We give them names they used to know. We call them out.
Oh?
We make them remember being something else. If the road needs names to hold them here, if names are its currency, then maybe we can give it worthless coins. Rachel blinked at him, as if the idea were both brilliant and insane. You mean call out people's names? Take them away? Trade one name for another. Evan's voice had sharpened. We call out the names of the lost Holloway Weaver. Jenkins called them until the children in the pews know them. If the road wants names, give it names it can't use to bait us. If it takes a name in place of our lives, it will have a ledger. Let's weigh it with dead names. The robed figure laughed toward what passed for laughter in that throat. The sound made the lights in the church shudder. Names, it said. You think you can ransom yourself with echoes? Evan's skin prickled. Could feel the children pressing, smelled the mildew of long-buried things. Still, he started. Thomas Weaver, Emily Jenkins, Caleb Porter, Reverend James Holloway. The bus 1962, the missing 4 1974. We give you the names of the empty. With each name, he slurred into the air. The mist thickened and then thinned, as if the words carried weight. The children stirred. One by one, faces in the pews flexed like something pulled from ice. The book on the pew fluttered, letters dissolved. The name Holloway winked out like a spent match. The robed figure made a sound close to a hiss. Then it lowered its head just once, the slightest incline. The atmosphere changed. For a beat, the church was only a church. The pews sat where pews should sit. The smell of wet earth relented, replaced by dust and old pipe tobacco. Evan didn't let go, kept naming old names from the folder, the ones that hurt, the ones that meant something to someone once. He didn't cry. There was no room for tears. He heard Rachel add voices, 2 jagged lists of names, the syllables tasting like salvation as they left her mouth. Matthew Porter, Sarah Ellis, the Holloway widow, the miners, driver Thomas Green. The more they named, the more the pale people in the pew looked alive, or at least like they once had been alive, and not like puppets of the road. At last, the robed figure lowered its arms fully. The mist around the pulpit thinned, and the hollow children's songs became an echo, distant and less urgent. It didn't go away. The place was still wrong. The smell's still there, but the teeth of the thing had dulled. Enough, the figure said. Its voice was small now. A bargain. Names for names. Evan felt a bargain close around him like a glove. He realized the practice had shifted something a ledger balanced, not by coin, but by syllable. He and Rachel had given names the thing wanted. In return, the thing unanchored some weight from their shoulders. Derek's voice, somewhere in the blur, was muffled then clearer. The boy was returning from whatever pool had taken him. He staggered into view by the pulpit, eyes wild but his body whole. They were not free. Not yet. The church still held them. Mist still hummed with appetite. The immediate threat, the robed figure's hunger, had been satiated, for now, by other people's names. The figure bowed, a mockery of grace, and the children in the pews slumped like dolls with their wind removed. Evan caught his breath like someone rising from deep underwater. We traded, he said hoarsely. We gave it names, paid. Rachel pressed her forehead against his arm, shaking. Will that keep it away? She whispered. No, Evan said. He might have been lying. He might have been saying what they both needed to hear. But it bought us time. Outside, the mist shivered. From deep in the pews, a soft, small voice, like a child's, in the dark counted slowly. 1, 2. Evan realized then that the road wasn't a single monster to be killed. It was an economy. It lived on names and memory. They had paid with names. Now they had to decide what would be spent next. They had a bargain, and bargains always required enforcement. As they left the church, the world outside the hollow miles seemed marginally less hungry. The pumps at the gas station still leaked black. The diner still smelled of rot. But the path back somehow stretched toward them, firmer, the mist thinning at the edges like breath on glass. They walked side by side, each step a small rebellion. The road behind them closed like a sigh, not vanishing but waiting. Evan looked up at the crooked stars and thought of all the names still left in the folder back home. He thought of Tyler's face in the church, of Derek's hollow knuckles, of Rachel's bleeding arms. They had won nothing permanent, only pause. But sometimes a pause was the only kind of victory a frightened town could hope for. They had bought time and they were not planning to waste it. The mist thinned like smoke, fading at dawn. Evan blinked hard. He was standing not in the hollow mile anymore, but on blacktop. Real blacktop. The moon shone overhead, clear and sharp, and the trees of Mill Creek lined both sides. For a breathless moment, he thought it was over, that they had crossed back. Rachel stumbled beside him, her face streaked with grime. Derek clutched her hand, trembling, his knuckles still raw from fighting ghosts. None of them spoke. They were afraid if they did, the road might hear them. Behind them, the fog pulsed once, like a living lung, then collapsed inward. The church, the diner, the dead children, all gone. Only the long stretch of Dead Mile Road remained. Rachel was the first to whisper, "We made it." Evan wanted to believe her, but something in him knew better. They started walking. The road stretched exactly 1 mile, just as every story had said. Evan counted the steps. He couldn't stop himself. He had to know if the math worked out. Every crack in the pavement, every patch of weeds at the edges, every sagging tree branch felt wrong now, like parts of a body they had walked through. Halfway down, a rusted street sign leaned against the ditch. Mile 0. Evan's throat tightened. He'd never seen that marker before. "Almost there," Derek muttered, his voice hoarse. Almost, the sound of footsteps joined theirs. Not from behind, from inside the pavement. Evan froze. The footsteps matched theirs perfectly, an echo too precise to be natural. When they stopped walking, the echo stopped. When they moved again, it followed. Rachel gripped his arm. "Don't stop. Just keep going." The end of the road glimmered ahead, a faint shimmer like heat off asphalt. Beyond it, Evan thought he saw the curve of Mill Creek's main street. It's a gas station, the corner diner. Home. But the shimmer didn't feel like safety. It felt like a filter. Like they weren't stepping back into the world. They were stepping into another layer of the same trick. They reached the end. Evan took Rachel's hand, and Derek's too, squeezing tight. "On 3, he whispered. 1, 2. They stepped forward. The shimmer broke. They were standing in Mill Creek. The real one, by all appearances. Houses sat quiet under the moon. The streetlights hummed. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. Rachel gasped, dropping to her knees. Derek sobbed, his small body shaking. But Evan didn't celebrate. He looked back. Dead Mile Road lay quiet and ordinary behind them, stretching into the dark like nothing had ever happened. No mist, no cracking pavement, no hands clawing up from the blacktop. Ordinary, too ordinary. The next morning, Mill Creek woke like it always had. The townsfolk went to work, opened their shops, fried bacon, and poured coffee. But whispers spread fast. 3 kids missing for a whole night had come stumbling out of the woods at dawn, covered in dirt and blood, eyes wild. Sheriff Dooley said it was hysteria. Reverend Holloway's old sermons got dug up again. Earl Hadley just shook his head and muttered, "Told you the road keeps count." Rachel's parents wouldn't let her out of the house. Derek's mom called him a liar until she saw the black sludge still crusted on his sneakers. Evan tried to write everything down, but the words twisted on the page letters backwards, like sentences running in circles until they meant nothing at all. Dead Mile Road had let them go, but it hadn't finished with them. That night, Evan woke to a sound outside his window. Footsteps, slow, steady, matching his breath. Crept to the glass, heart hammering, and looked out. On the street below, Tyler stood. His Batman hoodie was torn, his skin still pale and gray. But his smile was wide and patient. He raised one hand and pointed at the woods. At the road, Evan didn't scream. He couldn't. His throat locked. Behind Tyler, more shapes appeared. Dozens. Children with hollow eyes. Adults with twisted jaws. Faces Evan recognized from the old photographs in Holloway's folder. They stood silent, waiting. And as Evan pressed his palms against the glass, he heard the whisper in his head, not spoken aloud inside. The road is never just 1 mile. It's every mile. Every road. Everywhere. Rachel would hear it too. Derek would, everyone who'd ever stepped on it. They hadn't escaped. It had been marked. The next morning, Mill Creek was quiet again. Too quiet. On the edge of town, Dead Mile Road sat empty under the sun, cracks spreading a little wider, pavement darker than the rest. At the mile zero marker, fresh letters had been scratched into the metal. Evan, Rachel. Derek, the road had kept their names, and it was waiting.